Well, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's having a lovely morning today. What I wanted to talk to you a bit about is this axe right here. So this is something that I bought off of eBay as sort of a replacement for a Wetterlings / Grand First Brooks small forest axe. And what it is actually a framer's hatchet from a very unknown long time ago. And it's got more of a profile similar to what I would see Wetterlings having. You know, Wetterlings generally has a little bit fatter cheeks than a Grand First Brooks does on their axe head, and that's kind of why I wanted it. This is in the ballpark of the weight that you would want for something like a small forest axe / boy's axe, or I forget all the different names for it, but you know, it's enough weight that you could put a longer handle so that you can use two hands with it for tasks that would require a heavier swing. And I've really enjoyed this thing. One thing I've noticed so far, because I've mainly just been using it for splitting kindling, it doesn't have an edge on it, and so I'm going to utilize an angle grinder with specifically a flap disc, which those of you who don't do fabrication or anything, so it's basically just a disc that's built up of a whole bunch of layers of sandpaper. And what that does that's different than a normal grinding wheel is this is basically more forgiving. It doesn't take off as much metal. It doesn't get your metal as hot, so you run less risk of taking off the temper of your steel and that kind of thing. So I'm going to take some time real quick to put a rudimentary edge on this, because that thing's about as dull as a 2x4 right now. Like I said, I was only using it for splitting kindling, but I figured I'd put an edge on it right now because I've thoroughly enjoyed this thing. And I'm at a point now where I almost think that there are some significant advantages to this. So let me put an edge on this, then I'll get back with you on those reasons I just mentioned. Okay, I'm back with you. So it really didn't take too long, and this is not by any means like a shaving sharp edge. Got an alarm going off there for a second. Excuse me. This is definitely not something that is shaving sharp at this point, but like I say, it's just an angle grinder with a flap disc. So don't think I got it too hot to take the temper off of this thing. That is something to watch out for if you're going to do this, because you can, especially if you're using a regular grinding wheel instead of a flap disc, you can really generate a lot of heat really fast with this. If you don't have an angle grinder, you can of course do this with a file, but that is going to take a very long time, and you know, Godspeed to you if you're going to do that. But yeah, I wanted to mention with this thing, you know, it's got the thickness of that of a Wetterlings axe, which that edge profile, that edge geometry, is some of the biggest factors in terms of how the axe will split wood. So I would imagine that this does something similar to a Wetterlings, because it's a similar weight with a similar edge profile or edge geometry. Of course, getting it really sharp makes it far better for bushcraft type tasks. But one thing that I think actually makes this better is, well, one, price. I got this, you know, used off of eBay, and I believe it's a plum, but it's so patinaed now that I can't even see where the writing for plum is now. Love that patina. That's a natural patina too. I didn't even force that one. The advantage I see to it is that it has a hardened pole on the back. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe most axes have a non-hardened pole, hammer pole on the back, and the reason for that, I actually forget. I feel like I knew it at one point in time, but I don't remember it now. But the advantage to this is you can really wail on things, and it doesn't have to just be wood. You can, you know, for example, tent pegs, if you're using metal tent pegs, or really nails, or anything that you might be using that happens to be metal when you're bushcrafting, or even when you're doing some obscure project, you wouldn't have to worry about this hammerhead mushrooming, or like all that steel rolling over the edge, since this is hardened. So that's a huge advantage I see. I thought I might be disadvantaged by the smaller surface area of the pole, but it really has not been an issue for me personally. So this is an old framer's hatchet, And I should have brought my other hatchet out. I had another hatchet that I modified. You'll see people modifying and cutting this off. I personally didn't want to yet because I like the weight. Part of the reason that I liked this axe was it was heavy enough to be kind of in that ballpark of small forest axe / boy's axe, replacement type deal. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my rant on why this is a contender for that bushcrafting axe position. It, of course, will need a lot more work on the edge, especially if you want it to get into that shaving sharp territory, especially for bushcraft type tasks. And the other downside to this is, within reason, but it's probably not going to be as high quality of a steel as something coming out of Sweden or, hand forged, that type of thing. But honestly, for the price of this thing, I think I got this for something like $5-10 on eBay because I bought it in a lot with some other hammerheads and things. Hard to go wrong and hard to argue with, at least from my perspective. They're both great tools, but yeah, there's my thought process on this. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. Well, thank you for watching this, working on this axe head and listening to me rant a bit on it. As I often do whenever I think about working on these types of projects, this framer's hatchet, this was a discarded tool. This was something that was once useful to someone, and it got, it didn't have a handle on it when I got it. It got tossed aside and kind of forgotten about and no longer cared for, no longer used. And I kind of, oftentimes whenever I do this type of thing, I equate that to thinking of it spiritually and how so often our lives do not look perfect. Our lives can often look like we've been mistreated, mishandled by people or things or companies or any number of things. It can look like we have nicks and dings from being misused by others. We are rusted because maybe others didn't oil us well or didn't take care of us. We can receive a lot of damage, and we can also be discarded. And I know a lot of people feel that way. We can also make a lot of mistakes for our own life too. And I'm not sure if that works well for this metaphor, but thinking about this of being neglected, I guess, and mistreated by others, I think about God because, we can make a lot of mistakes. We can be treated terribly by people. We can have the feeling by that treatment that we're not worthy and that we're not useful, that we're not valuable. And yet God steps in and he takes care of us. God steps in and he puts a new edge on the tool. God steps in and he puts a new handle on the tool. There's a lot of value in that thought. Like just the way that God steps in to bring new life to the old, crusty, rusty things that were discarded. And even brings new life and brings new value and use to people who have made a lot of bad decisions. And you see that throughout his scriptures, how he ends up taking people whom you wouldn't think he would take. Rahab the harlot comes to mind. A literal prostitute of this, I believe it was the Canaanites. And he uses her even in the midst of her telling a lie for the sake of the children of Israel. He both counts that for her righteousness and utilizes her in the process. So I don't know, I could go on more with different examples, but there's one for you. What I'm trying to say is basically, if you feel like you're an older, beat up, rusty, crusty, maybe not even older, but just misused, mistreated, mistake-making person, don't let that deter you from coming to God. I've heard people say before that they didn't, for example, want to come to church because they wanted to get themselves in a good place, in a right place before they come to church. They want to clean up their lives before they go to church. But that's kind of like getting cleaned up before you take a shower. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. You go to the shower to get clean. You go to church to get clean. And more than anything, you go to God to get clean. Church is just a vessel through which God can work in your life, and God can use you for others. So I guess I just want to encourage you to not feel like you're ever at a point where God can't utilize your life, like you're too far gone. That doesn't really exist. There's only one sin that cannot be forgiven, and that's a whole nother video and an interesting topic for sure. But it seems like half the people think you can't even commit that sin, and that if you're conscious of God and sorry for your sins and, remorseful about the mistakes that you've made, it's already proof positive that you haven't committed the unforgivable sin. So yeah, just don't think you're too far for God, too far gone for God. He can save you, and he can do so much with so little. The Bible says his strength is made perfect in our weakness. So your weakness is literally God's strength whenever he uses you. Just want to encourage you in that. All right, this time for real. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. I'll see you later.